they are a band that has fans, but they're fair weather fans as far as I'm concerned. I've always been a huge fan of this band, but a lot of people in the vinyl community that I've talked to seem to have abandoned them after the second or third album. They felt they got too soft. I didn't. I thought they grew in stature throughout everything. And I like stuff that people don't like. That's just normal for me. I'm the pop guy, remember? Not going to talk about everything because the most recent album I've never heard. The rest of them we'll get into. And I'll let you know why. I've been following these guys for 40 plus years. This week on Influencers, the sounds of Foreigner. Hey, LTC Kirkham here. Welcome to Influencers. This is a show where I talk about the artists that I have become huge fans of, that I've collected, that have become an influence on my musical tastes and my musical life. And this week we're going to talk about Foreigner, led by Mick Jones and Lou Gramm, pretty much. Foreigner, Ian MacDonald also. Foreigner has been around since the late 70s. They made their debut in early 1977, and that most of the original lineup, those three and a couple other people, were around through the first 7 albums. That changed over the years as people started having difficulty, but the music has always been good. When it comes to rock bands, Foreigner is one of those that I truly enjoy. I've always loved. I never got to see them in concert. I'm sad about that. But I've always enjoyed everything they did. So let's talk their albums. First up, the first album, 1977's Foreigner. This is a self-titled debut album that launched him into the stratosphere with Feels Like the First Time, Cold as Ice, and Long, Long Way From Home as the singles. There was also Star Rider, Head Knocker, The Damage Is Done, Woman Oh Woman, At War with the World, Fool With You Anyway, and I Need You. Has a great lyric sleeve on the inside with pictures of the band on the typical Atlantic label of the era. Feels Like the First Time was great, but Cold as Ice was phenomenally good. One of my favorite songs when I was a freshman in high school. It has always stood the test of time. All of their music stands the test of time with me. Now, it was a great debut album. I mean, all the songs are good. There's nothing that's terrible. But it would pale in comparison to a couple of later albums. And I continually found myself liking them more and more. Even though, for a disco fan like me at the time, 1977, who was into Teen Idols, ABBA, pop, Barry Manilow, disco, Foreigner was a little on the hard side for me. This is the album, one of the albums that seemed to be okay in the vinyl community. I think it's a bit stuffy, but that's me. Now, they followed it up with what was truly a gem. Now, the critics didn't like it at first, but overall it has become, I think, their seminal favorite among fans, although the fourth album is also up there, and it was their biggest seller. But this album they've never come close to this. And I mean, they did well. No, it's not my favorite album. It's my second favorite, but I love this, and it was definitely one of the best albums of late 1978, early 1979. It was fantastic. This is Double Vision from Foreigner. There's the back cover. Double Vision included the title track, Hot Blooded, Blue Morning, Blue Day, and what was the fourth single? Or maybe that was the only three. Maybe there was just the three of them. There's also You're All I Am, Back Where You Belong, Love Has Taken Its Toll, Tramontane, I Have Waited So Long, Lonely Children, and Spellbinder. This played so much when I was in high school. I'm amazed. I haven't replaced it. This is an OG. I'm amazed that there's no seam splits, no problems with the cover, because it was in and out of this case, of this cover, so many times. It had a custom label from Atlantic. And it's interesting that Tramontane is the only instrumental track they ever recorded. Tramontane, one of my favorite songs. It's the flip side of Hot Blooded on the 45. Loved that song. Still do. It's very dark, foreboding. It is one of my favorite instrumentals of all time. And I really think it deserved more credit than it got. This album was full of great album tracks. But Double Vision, Hot Blooded, Blue Morning, Blue Day, all monster hits of their own. And definitely could go no wrong for me in late 1978 when it came out. Fantastic album from Foreigner. Now the third album, I will admit I was a little disappointed by. It's also a favorite among the vinyl community, people who like Foreigner. Excuse me. But it's okay, and the singles were great. But overall, the album is kind of disjointed to me. Although I do like it, it's probably the one I play the least of all of them. This is 1979's Head Games. Also got trouble for that controversial photo. Some people thought this girl was like being attacked. She's not. She snuck into the boys' room to erase graffiti about her, and she's got caught doing it. That's what that is supposed to be. It is a great album. Had hit singles Dirty White Boy, Head Games, and Women on it. Also along with Love on the Telephone, I'll Get Even With You, 17, The Modern Day, Blinded by Science, Do What You Like, and Rev on the Red Line, which is considered a hit of theirs, even though it was actually a flip side. Rev on the Red Line, easily my favorite song on this album. I like Head Games, I like Dirty White Boy. They're okay. But overall, this was the most disappointing album for me. Again, we have the lyric sleeve, great pictures of the band, and, if I'm not mistaken, the same custom label from the second album. Dirty White Boy is a great song, and Head Games is a great song, and they're harder songs. Rev on the Red Line is just a masterpiece, and I wish it had been released as a single. A-side single. I really love that song, and I've always loved it. Women isn't a bad song. I think Love on the Telephone was also released as a single, but it didn't chart. I wondered if they, after the last album, Double Vision, which I just absolutely adored, this one disappointed me, and I wasn't so sure. I was like, oh, have they hit their peak already? No. Because in 1981, Foreigner 4 hit the chart. This was their most successful album. It spent 10 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Top 200 album chart. It was the first album with a pared down membership of just 4 members instead of 6 or 7. And it produced 4 huge hits: Jukebox Hero, Waiting for a Girl Like You, Urgent, and no, those are the 3 hits. So I guess it was only 3 hits. Also contained Nightlife, Break It Up, Luann, I'm Gonna Win, Woman in Black, Girl on the Moon, and Don't Let Go. This is the album that turned people off of Foreigner because of Waiting for a Girl Like You. There are a class of people, you know who you are, Professor Carlson, that get turned off by power ballads. Waiting for a Girl Like You is the most successful power ballad of all time without ever hitting number one. It spent 10 whopping weeks at number 2, stuck behind both Physical by Olivia Newton-John and I Can't Go For That by Hall & Oates. Or maybe it was Private Eyes. It was one of their songs. Never made it to number 1. It's the biggest number 2 song of all time. And there's a reason for that. It's a damn great song. All you people that bitch about power ballads, why? What is wrong with a band slowing things down for a minute or two, here and there, when they're still rocking out on the rest of the album? I mean, Urgent is one of their best songs. Shannon did a great R&B cover of it a couple of years later. And Jukebox Hero, which talks about, you know, pretty much what they were dreaming of as kids. This album is top notch, and if you turn your nose up on it because of Waiting for a Girl Like You, shame on you. Love this album. And if you thought that was going to alienate people, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, everybody was alienated by the 5th album, because God forbid it had their only number 1 song on it, and it was a power ballad too. Sometimes I really think there are certain areas of the vinyl community that are a bit fickle with their music taste. I mean, not to say that everybody doesn't have a right to have their own taste, but if you turn off a whole band because of one song, okay, more power to you, but I can't stomach that crap. From 1984, Agent Provocateur, this is Foreigner's best album, period, bar none. Love in Vain, Down on Love, Growing Up the Hard Way, I Want to Know What Love Is, Reaction to Action, She's Too Tough, Stranger in My Own House, That Was Yesterday, Tooth and Nail, and Two Different Worlds. I Want to Know What Love Is was their monster number 1 hit. That Was Yesterday is the best single of their entire career, and I will stand by that. You can argue that with me all you want to, but I'm sorry, this album is top notch, and to get rid of it because of Down on Love and I Want to Know What Love Is, both of which are power ballads, I'm sorry. Here we go with the fickle thing again. Once again, lyric sleeve, and once again, custom label. I know I'm probably being too harsh, because everybody has a right to like and not like what they do and do not like. I mean, people like Led Zeppelin. I'm not a big fan. People like the Beatles. I'm a casual fan. People like certain Foreigner. I love it all. That's fine. That's what makes the musical community go round. Now, from this point on, I'm switching to Magic Box, because everything else I have is on CD. And the next album was 1987's Inside Information. This album was not as big as the last 2, but they were still having hits off of it. The album included Heart Turns to Stone, Can't Wait, Say You Will, I Don't Want to Live Without You, another one of those God power ballads. Counting Every Minute, Inside Information, The Beat of My Heart, Face to Face, Out of the Blue, and A Night to Remember. It's a good album. It's not a great album. It's nothing's going to be as good as Agent Provocateur was to me. But the singles, Say You Will, Don't Want to Live Without You, and Heart Turned to Stone, were all fantastic, and I loved all of them. I don't think Heart Turned to Stone actually hit the top 40. The other 2 did. So that was terrific. This was Lou Graham's last album with the band for a while. He would depart the band. He had a concurrent successful solo career at this time, with a couple of great solo albums that I loved. Both of them producing top 10 hits. But this would be, he would come back later, but this was his last album with them at the time. Mick Jones had not been getting along, and they ended up splitting up for a while. When Foreigner resurfaced in 1991, Johnny Edwards was their new lead singer, and the album was called Unusual Heat. It was their final album on Atlantic, and it's just not very good. That's no fault of Edwards, but Graham's songwriting is missing sorely here, and you can tell. There's a couple of good songs on this album, but not great. Only Heaven Knows, Low Down and Dirty, I'll Fight for You, Moment of Truth, Mountain of Love, Ready for the Rain, When the Night Comes Down, Safe in My Heart, No Hiding Place, Flesh Wound, and Unusual Heat. None of the singles hit the top 40, the first time that had happened. And it's just not a very good album. It's not bad compared to other albums, particularly Head Games, which is better than this one. It isn't up to their normal standards. And a lot of that is because Mick was doing most, if not all, of the writing at that point, and there was no input from Lou Gramm, who was brilliant in some places as a songwriter. So, yeah, I can take or leave this album. I do have it. I do listen to it every now and then. It's not great, but it's not fatal either. Now, before their next album, they released a couple of compilations, and the one that came out in 1992 was called The Very Best and Beyond, and this reunited Mick Jones and Foreigner with Lou Gramm for 3 new tracks on the album. The new tracks on the album were Soul Doctor, Prisoner of Love, and With Heaven on Our Side, none of which were chart hits, and then the rest of the album is their greatest hits collection. It's missing a couple of songs, and it includes Rev on the Red Line, which was a B-side. It's a good collection to have if you're into Foreigner. But the album that I like really well from the 90s is their next album, 1994's Mr. Moonlight. It was released on BMG and the Japan, Arista in Europe, and Rhythm Safari, a very small label here in the States. Despite the fact that it wasn't on a big label, they did have a major hit with Until the End of Time, which was a hit on the AC chart, and also singles White Lie, All I Need to Know, and Rain. Plus, Running the Risk, Real World, Big Dog, Hole in My Soul, I Keep Hoping, Under the Gun, and Hand on My Heart. Lou Gramm returns full-time to the band here, and it shows. Love the power ballads here. Lou had done very well with the solo albums, and I'll talk about those at some point, but not on this show. And they didn't do another studio album until after Lou had permanently left the band in 2003. But Mr. Moonlight did not do well because it was on a small label. They didn't have the best promotion. It peaked at 136, the lowest of all of their charts albums. And it was more of a 90s sound. It was not the hard driving sound they had started with in the 70s, or even the pop melody oriented harder sound they had in the 80s. This was morphing into more of a synth pop sound with guitars. And while I enjoy that, and it is a great album all the way across, the general people didn't really care for it. General Foreigner fans did not care for it. And that's a shame, because I thought it was a terrific album. Now, after that, I stopped buying albums by them. They did a couple of live albums, which are good. I've heard them. Their next new album was released in 2009, so 15 years went by. Kelly Hansen, formerly of Hurricane, stepping in as lead singer. The album was called Can't Slow Down. I've never heard it, never want to listen to it. Not that I don't like it, but I'm afraid of it because I've heard some very bad reviews of it. It's kind of like Foreigner's version of Chinese Democracy. And I like Hansen as a vocalist. I liked him in Hurricane. I liked him in a couple other groups he's been a part of. I've always been afraid to do this one. So if you like it, let me know, and I might check it out. But just didn't care for it. The idea of, once again, no Lou Gramm on lead vocals, because Lou Gramm is just marvelous to me. That's where they stop. Now, Lou's done some stuff since. He also was very ill with a brain tumor for a while. They messed up his thyroid, I think it was, or pituitary. Something caused a weight issue. When they took it out, it was a benign brain tumor. And so, but he has been back on stage as recently as last year. Foreigner was an arena rock band to end all arena rock bands. The only one that might be better is Journey, and I'll be talking about them in a few weeks. I like the ballads. I always have. Everybody that poo-poos the ballads irritates me, because I don't think that you're really listening to Foreigner as a whole. The ballads fit part of the puzzle just as all the rock stuff does. And their album tracks, Tramontane, the only instrumental they released, and Rev on the Red Line, which is a top-notch song, are little gems that a lot of Foreigner fans may have missed if they weren't buying the albums, although they were both flip-side singles. I believe Rev on the Red Line was on the Flip of Head Games. I'm not sure. Tramontane was on Hot Blooded. Both songs that should have been A-sides, as far as I'm concerned. Tramontane probably wouldn't have sold, but I enjoy instrumentals, and I loved that one. That's right up there with Switch 625 by Def Leppard, and most of Joe Satriani's stuff as a great rock instrumental. In my book, at least. Foreigner was one of the first harder edge bands I got into. They weren't heavy metal. They were rock. Mid-tempo to hard rock. They didn't go as far as hard rock like Black Sabbath would or Led Zeppelin, but they weren't straightforward power pop, which is what Def Leppard eventually morphed into on Hysteria and Adrenalize from the harder edge stuff they started with. Foreigner, Def Leppard, Journey, Styx, all favorites of mine. The only one I have left to talk about is Journey. And the original arena band, which to me is Three Dog Night. I'll talk about them later this season too. Foreigner is right up there with one of the greatest acts of the 80s and 90s because of Lou Gramm's vocal and Mick Jones's incredible writing. The two of them made some great team, although Mick was a weaker writer when Lou wasn't helping, or didn't have Lou to sing for him. They were truly a combination that were formidable, and when they weren't together, it didn't gel properly. Foreigner does not gel without the two of them in the correct way. That's one of the reasons I think they have been so successful together. Now, other bands have had other lead singer changes. Kansas had a lead singer change. Journey's had a couple, Styx, but none of the stuff with the other singers was necessarily as good, just like with Foreigner, but they were able to have hits with it, with the other acts, which Foreigner did not do. John Elefante did lead on a couple of Kansas hits, and although he hasn't really done leads, there were some other Styx members here and there in the early 90s when they got back together, before Dennis and Tommy had their permanent split. It's all relative. Foreigner is just terrific, and they're at their best on their first 5 albums, and Mr. Moonlight from 1994. Unusual Heat is okay, not great. Head Games is okay, not great. Everything else, stupendous. And I have always loved them, and I always will. If you are giving Foreigner a pass because of the power ballads, there's this thing called Spotify where you can skip them. Listen to the heavy metal stuff. Listen to the metal stuff, the rock stuff. You'll like it. It irritates me that people do that. And I don't know, maybe I'm guilty of doing it too. I probably am. Everybody's guilty of not doing, something with some bands. But I really think they deserve more than they get in the vinyl community. And hopefully, in the long run, they will be remembered as one of the greatest rock acts of all time. Foreigner. And after my little sip, if you haven't signed up for the subscriptions yet, please do. And if you have, thank you. Don't forget to share and like what you're seeing, and please leave a comment. Influencers is all about those acts that I love that maybe nobody else does sometimes, or has not heard of as much as I have. Foreigner is not one of those acts, but I disagree with a lot of the vinyl community on their attitude about Foreigner. And I think they're a lot better band than anybody gives them credit for, particularly on those first 5 albums. And Agent Provocateur is just the greatest Foreigner album ever. I know most people who like the heavy stuff don't like it because it's softer, more synth-oriented. For me, it was terrific, and That Was Yesterday still stands out as their best song ever. But your mileage may vary. I know I'm being kind of hard, but it's the heat. It's the hot weather we're having up here. I'll have more of my influencers in weeks ahead. I will be doing Journey. I've already done Styx, and I'll probably do Kansas next season. They're not on the schedule yet. Three Dog Night's coming up this season. Yanni is coming up. Richard Marx, Ishla Desma, Carrie Underwood, a few other people. Hope you'll continue to watch and see what they mean to me as artists, as well as Foreigner did. And Kenny G and Jan Arden and the Bee Gees in the recent episodes. In any case, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me again. For Influencers, I'm TC Kirkham, TKR Video Central, and the Kirkham Report. I will see you on the interwebs, all over the place. Ciao, baby.